Salawite Omnes, I am Ruminous, and today we're doing a review for Crash Wrath of Cortex, which unfortunately is a real game and has Crash once again go through regions and timelines to prevent Cortex from having any manner of happiness. The whole purpose of the game is the same as the others: destroy boxes to collect shiny gems and defeat Cortex, which is the only right thing that they did in this dumpster fire. It took me about 8 hours of torture to complete this game, and I didn't even get 100% because one of the gems was impossible to get after trying for 40 minutes with the horrendous controls. There is no consistency with the controls, if you could even call them controls. I had many moments where Crash just disobeyed me like a level 100 Pokemon, or did do actions when it made no sense that he would do them. Too many times that I press and hold R1 to do a long jump just to plummet to my death seconds later. The rolling levels are literally Sisyphean, as there is no controlling this gerbil, especially when the level is just slopes. The player can repeat actions indefinitely, which will be needed against the stupid camera because depth perception is hard when staring only at Crash's back. The player can jump, spin, slam without limitations, although checkpoints are sparse and require playing the levels for far too long when some shenanigans kill you from off screen. There is significant delay in some of the actions, the jump is needlessly floaty, the bazooka takes 9 years to get out of his pocket, and Coco, for whatever reason, has to stand still to do her sweeping attack. I love to play Crash games so I can take a tea break while spinning around. Luckily, the jump and spin actions are the only ones frequently used because all the power-ups are gimmicks, and the slam move is somehow magnetically attracted to the abyss. The levels, at least the platforming ones, have enough gaps, but the level design is so wide that the player can just scoot on by most enemies without an issue. Half of the levels are non-platformers, which completely blocks the ability to use any of the normal verbs. Other than to jump and spin, why are you even trying to do anything? The power-ups are only useful to get past certain hurdles that the developers put in to try and add some density to the game, and the slam, again, takes time to recover from, so that's useless. The bazooka is again relegated to cheese the game, or literally only required for the final boss, so why even have it in the game? The game does give autonomy to the player by letting them play through the levels as they wish, although does the stupid thing of forcing the player to beat the boss once the section is done, instead of allowing replays. The most important aspect of autonomy is the pause menu, which can be used to quit the game at a moment's notice. Crash moves like a feather, he is light and clings in the air. On the ground he struggles with refined movement despite the analog stick, and does not do minute movements. His speed is at least atrocious compared to the size of the levels. The levels are not overly long, but there are many sections that take way too long for no reason. The view is third person fixed behind the character. There's enough to see ahead and to the sides that can tell you when enemies and boxes are loaded in. No, I'm not joking, that happens all the time. The camera is probably the most effective enemy, where it decides to stare at Crash's neck when doing the monkey bars, so you can barely see where the enemies ahead are. It is also a common event where the camera just decides to shift around right before you walk into Nitro, so screw you and do the level again. The growth in this game comes from the level design and the hazards, as the enemies never change and never provide any sense of challenge. Instead of actually platforming challenges or adding complexity, the developers just decided to add Nitro everywhere, create a few new challenges, and particularly make the non-platforming levels obnoxious with troll design of shoving hazards everywhere from off screen. The flow of the game reminds me of the Red Devil boat that my uncle had. Once he got 3 to 5 inches away from the port, he ramped that bitch up to Mach 5, slamming against the waves and getting some sweet airtime. Unlike Crash's 3 levels, this is horrifying in real life, and in this game, the levels just start ramping up to ridiculous annoyance after the first set. There is some degree of staggered changes in the hazards, but it's mostly a gauntlet of nitro and type jumps that don't work because of the inconsistent hitboxes. The game is not difficult, but frustrating. The hit and hurt boxes are inconsistent. Crash will literally just glide from edges even after landing on them for a second or two. Crash will stop moving for no reason, and things will require the player to know the level design because reacting to the nitro that is covered by Crash's back is impossible to react to. I leisurely sauntered through most levels because the enemies are so far apart and don't track to Crash. I honestly do not know how this game would sustain anybody's attention who has other games to play. The gimmicks are annoying, especially when walking across the nitro, which is rarely a puzzle but just a straight bridge. The non-platforming sections are horrendously designed with horrendous controls, but the good news is that there's at least 15 of them. The visuals, sounds, and challenge are butt sauce. If I was 12 and only had this to play, I would probably suffer through it, but I have so many other games to play that I would rather have another 130-pound rock fall on my foot. It's been a week and my foot still hurts, but that instant pain is far better than being dragged through these airplane levels again. The story is that Cortex now has a giant monster with elemental mask. The story is just as useless as the other games, but this time, lacks the humor or any creativity of the previous games. It's just Crash 3 again, although lacking any source of substance. What even is the music in this game? The music hardly fits with the themes of most levels and is often just obnoxious. Many times I've heard the music loop, as in start, then stop again, and I've heard it cut off for no reason. The sounds are equally as bad where the spin move just stops making a noise in the middle of the attack, and most sound effects from the environment lack the volume or intensity that it deserves. Upon death, my gerbil ball completely disintegrates, and they thought that putting a single Lego block away gently was a suitable sound effect? The sounds of music will often clash, overshadow each other, or simply just not mesh well. The mechanics in this game are as reliable as papier-mâché screws. The hit and hurt boxes do as they please, where Crash will just slide across entire boxes, land on edges just to fall through, or stand still and die 3 seconds later in the same spot to his stationary flamethrower. The types of levels are completely random, and even then, the same types of levels will have completely different designs that, of course, don't mesh well. There are also 100+ boxes in every level for some reason. Even though they put half the damn things in the bonus area, some of the levels have boxes in piles ripe for slaughter, others have the boxes scattered in a frustrating scavenger hunt. Other than the power-ups that are useless, except for maybe the double jump, the only manipulative in the game is the time trial, which I refuse to do on moral grounds. Although, it's not a bad idea to try and rush through this game so you can go to therapy and try to figure out why you hate yourself enough to play this game. Because the game is poorly refined, some manipulatives would be nice, like allowing Crash to play the Coco levels, or allowing the player to stop the incessant spawning of the enemy airplanes so they can think for a second. There are too few assistives in this game, but there is the standard free mask after so many lives without progress. Considering the amount of nitro, it would be nice if nitro started disappearing after so many deaths. It would also be great if the camera shifted out and to the side when running in a hallway, or if the chasing enemies when running towards the camera slowed or delayed their start. The entire game is detrimental to humanity, but there are some detrimentals. The hurt and hit boxes were already mentioned, but the metal boxes revealing the hidden boxes will take too long to spawn. There are also no longer checkpoints at bonus rounds, no checkpoints before death runs or gems, making retrying these stupid sections a chore. Some enemies will take up the entire path, even when they actually don't, but the hurt boxes say they do, and Crash will need to kill them. The guidings in this game guided me straight to drinking my problems away to forget this horrid journey. Most levels are wide open with straight paths, rejecting any need or planning for putting a guiding mechanic into the game. Some levels will have fruit to point the way when the paths diverge, but sometimes the fruit is a lie, takes the player away from boxes, or the paths loop back to the same point, making it all meaningless. There are many spots where the developers went for intuitive and failed. None of the commands are taught, allowing the player to test out the buttons, which is good. From there, it all goes downhill, and by that I mean downhill from the rhinos who will stampede your soul if you don't hold the R1 button for some reason, but there's no indication that you actually need to do this to go faster other than dying 6 times without progress. Coco plays entirely differently, side note. Why? And you just have to figure that out one on the fly as she's thrust into the heat of battle, and the player has no reason to expect her moves to be different. The player is left to figure everything out, but there's no foundation, no hints, and no design to help the player figure out these things. The game is themed around the elements: air, fire, earth, water, electricity, and medieval knights. You would think that a game with elements would have levels incorporating them in some logical sense, or having enemies use these elements. Nope! Each section has a boss that incorporates an element, but the levels do not adhere to that element or theme. The variety is nice, but they really missed an opportunity to have some good growth and unique enemies in the different ice, water, fire, or laser levels. Who cares what the element is, as long as it's not these damn water levels? The game gives a first level that is somewhat decent at teaching the player. There are open spaces and plenty of boxes that test out the buttons, there's a death route that isn't explained, and will probably be confusing to anybody who hasn't played a Crash game before, and there are 147 boxes to teach the player to give up on 100%. The TNT and Nitro are there to show the different hazards, and the reinforced box is there without any real indication or guide on how to break it. There are also metal boxes that can't be broken, and so the player, based on having no indication whatsoever, might think that these boxes themselves can't be broken. The UI is copied from the previous games and is fine, although the disembodied head for the lives haunts my dreams. The text is decently sized enough, but could use improvements on spacing the sections out a bit more. The UX is pretty atrocious though. There are wide gaps between walls where Crash should be able to go for secrets, but can't for some reason. There are some clear indications where there are secret paths, except psych, there is an invisible wall past this isolated ledge with Nitro that we placed here as a trick. Gotcha! Some snow is icy and makes Crash slide, where the ice is used as an indicator of sliding. There is nothing here to indicate that Crash will slide. He just goes. It's snow. He shouldn't be doing that. The visuals are a complete disaster. The graphics are low poly with hardly any defining characteristics. You'd think with a new system that the models would be improved, but everything looked terrible, sometimes even uncomfortable or plain bad. The enemies are all discernible, even if ugly. The standard animations are okay most of the time, but often lack the refined touches to make it feel fluid or the intensity of the action. Many of the death animations are pathetic, which is a staple in the original trilogy. Crash sometimes just falls over, disappears entirely, and literally shrinks to nothing when cut by a fan blade. Don't think too hard on it or your brain will implode. The style is supposed to be wax figurines, at least that's what they look like. I think the developers were going for an exaggerated or cartoonish style, but the levels, models, and animations do not match with that intent and instead look uncanny and gross. They managed, probably by blind luck, to get some accessibility in this game. The boxes will often stand out against the background, yet some medieval levels will have wooden floorboards to match the color of the boxes. The enemies and hazards are brightly colored and clash against the background to make it easy to see for any sort of color blindness. The levels are so open and non-hostile that the players with stress or cognitive overwhelming can take a quick breather. Other than that, there really isn't anything that really is designed to help the players of various skills, mentalities, and disabilities. For final score, I give the gameplay control 20 out of 60, gameplay aspects 11 out of 60, story 1 out of 5, sound 2 out of 10, mechanics 17 out of 70, tutorial 6 out of 10, UI UX 4 out of 10, visuals 5 out of 20, and accessibility 3 out of 5. Overall, I give this game a 1 out of 5. The game is legitimately just bad. It's not unplayable, but there is so much that it doesn't work, doesn't function well, or screws over the players. There are many platformers, including Crash games before and after this, that are at least somewhat fun to play. This one is rehashing everything that 3 did, except worse in every regard. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. If you think I missed anything to add, or just want to complain about this game just as much as I did, or tell me how much I'm wrong and this is the greatest Crash game ever, please put in the comment section below so we can continue this discourse. But until next time, Wale te omnes.